You're not as smart as you think you are, and I can prove it in the next few minutes. Right now, at this exact moment, someone 3 levels above you is making decisions that will shape your next 5 years, and you have no idea it's happening. You think you're making choices. You think you're in control, but you're not. You're reacting, following patterns someone else programmed into you, playing a game where you don't even know the rules. And the worst part, you were trained to think this makes you intelligent. They gave you tests, you passed them. They gave you grades, you earned them. They told you that memorizing information and following instructions meant you were smart, and you believed it. But that's not intelligence. That's obedience wrapped in certificates. Real intelligence, it's something completely different. That is the ability to see what is actually happening while everyone else is distracted by what they were told to see. It's knowing when to move, when to stay still, and when to let someone else take the hit. It means understanding that the person who looks powerful isn't always the one with the power. Machiavelli figured this out 500 years ago. He watched kingdoms rise and fall, saw leaders praised one day and destroyed the next, and he realized something nobody wanted to admit. Morality doesn't determine outcomes. Understanding does. The world doesn't care if you're good, it cares if you're effective. There's a hierarchy to this, 10 levels, and most people die without ever moving past level 3. They spend their whole lives copying, reacting, performing, never once stopping to ask if any of it is real. You might be at level 1 right now and not know it. You might think you're at level 6 when you're actually at level 2. The gap between where you think you are and where you actually are, that S where all your problems come from. This video is going to make you uncomfortable because I am not here to make you feel smart. I'm here to show you where you actually stand, not where you want to be, not where you pretend to be, where you are right now, today, in the decisions you're making. Some of you will recognize yourself at the bottom and get defensive. Some will see yourself halfway up and realize you've been stuck there for years. And a few, maybe 1 or 2 watching this, will see yourself near the top and understand why everything feels so different for you. By the end of this, you'll know exactly which level controls your life. You'll know what's keeping you there, and you'll know what it costs to move up. But here's the thing, knowing doesn't change anything. Most people will watch this whole video, understand every word, and still stay exactly where they are because moving up requires killing parts of yourself, and most people aren't willing to do that. Are you? I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I control reality. Let's find out where you stand. Level 1, the sleeper. Most people are here and they have no clue. The sleeper isn't literally asleep. They're walking around, talking, working, making decisions, but none of it is conscious. It's all programmed response. They wake up when someone tells them to, eat what advertising tells them to eat, think what media tells them to think, fear what authority tells them to fear, and they never once ask who's doing the telling. The sleeper only acts when something acts on them first. Someone pushes, they push back. Someone speaks, they respond. But they never initiate, never create, never think beyond the immediate reaction in front of them. Their opinions? Not theirs. Borrowed from whoever spoke loudest or most recently. Their beliefs, absorbed from family, friends, or trending topics. Their direction in life, set by whoever happened to be pointing when they were looking for guidance. Ask a sleeper what they think about something, and they'll repeat what they heard on the news, what they saw online, or what everyone around them is saying. Not because they're lying, but because they genuinely believe that's their thought. They can't tell the difference between thinking and repeating. The sleeper craves 3 things: authority, routine, and consensus. They want someone to tell them what to do so they don't have to figure it out. They want the same pattern every day so they don't have to adapt. And they want everyone around them to agree so they know they're safe. Why? Because thinking for yourself is terrifying. It means you might be wrong. It means you might stand alone. It means you're responsible for what happens next. And the sleeper can't handle that weight, so they stay asleep. And the system loves them for it. Because here's what nobody tells you. The sleeper is fuel. Their energy is for structures that need compliance to function. They work jobs they don't question, buy things they don't need, support causes they don't understand, and call it life. You see this everywhere. The person who says, "I don't know, I just work here," and means it. The one who gets angry about headlines but never reads past the first paragraph. The one who does the same thing every day and wonders why nothing changes. They're not stupid, they're asleep. And asleep people can't be reasoned with, because you can't reason someone awake. They have to choose it. Machiavelli once said, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see, but few can feel. The sleeper only sees the surface. They can't feel the currents underneath moving them around like debris in a river." Waking up from this level is brutal, because it means admitting that most of your life wasn't yours, that the thoughts you defended weren't your thoughts, and that you've been a passenger pretending to drive. Most people never wake up. They get born, get trained, get used, and get buried, all without one original thought, without one moment of actual consciousness. If you're still watching this and getting defensive, ask yourself why. What nerve did I just hit? Level 2. The believer. The believer woke up, felt that sting of awareness, realized they were being controlled, and then immediately traded one controller for another. They found an ideology, a movement, a cause, something that gave them a framework for understanding the world, and they stopped thinking and started believing. Politics, religion, social justice, conspiracy theories, doesn't matter which one. What matters is that they outsourced their thinking to it. The ideology does the work now. It tells them what to think, what to believe, who to trust, who to hate. The believer thinks they're awake because they rejected the mainstream. They're not watching the news anymore. They're not following the crowd. They're part of something different, something special, something that sees the truth. But they're just as asleep as before. They just changed the channel. Where the sleeper obeys authority, the believer obeys ideology. Where the sleeper follows the crowd, the believer follows the movement. Different master, same slavery. The believer confuses morality with intelligence. They think because they believe the right things, they're smart. Because they're fighting for the right side, they're awake. But believing the right things and thinking clearly are not the same. You can be morally correct and strategically useless. You can be on the right side of history and still completely powerless to change anything. The believer doesn't see this because their identity is wrapped up in their beliefs. Challenge the belief and you challenge them. Question the ideology and you question their worth. So they defend it loudly, aggressively, desperately. They're predictable. Mention certain words and you can watch them react exactly how their ideology programmed them to react. No pause, no consideration, just automatic response disguised as conviction. The believer feels righteous, and that feeling is addictive. It's comfortable, it's community, it's purpose. But it's not intelligence, it's just sleep with better marketing. You see believers everywhere. They're the ones who can't have a conversation without preaching, can't hear a different perspective without getting defensive, can't separate disagreement from attack. They think they're warriors for truth, but they're just soldiers for someone else's war, following orders they think are revelations. The jump from sleeper to believer feels like freedom. Finally, you see what others don't. Finally, you understand. Finally, you're part of something bigger. But you're not free. You're just wearing a different collar. Real intelligence doesn't stop at belief. It keeps questioning, keeps testing, keeps asking, what if I'm wrong, even about the things it holds most strongly. The believer can't do that because doubt feels like betrayal, and betrayal feels like death. Level 3. The mimic. The mimic figured something out. Intelligence has value. Not real intelligence, the appearance of it. Sound smart and people treat you differently. They listen more, respect more, and give you opportunities they don't give others. So the mimic started collecting phrases, opinions, references and ideas like tools in a box, and they learned when to pull each one out for maximum effect. The mimic performs intelligence. They're not trying to understand deeply, they're trying to look like they understand deeply. And in most spaces, that's enough. They use big words, obscure references, and academic language. They drop names of philosophers, books, and studies. It sounds impressive, looks like substance, but it's hollow. Ask them to explain something in simple terms, and they struggle because they never actually understood it. They just memorized how it sounds. The mimic thrives in environments that reward appearance over results. Social media is perfect for them. Post something that sounds deep, get validation, move on. No need to prove it. No need to apply it. Just perform and collect. They're chameleons. They change their opinions based on the room, not consciously manipulating, just unconsciously adapting. They don't have a center, so they mirror whoever's in front of them. The dangerous thing about the mimic is they can fool people at higher levels. They've got the vocabulary down, the confidence, the delivery. Someone at level 1 or 2 can tell the difference between a mimic and someone who actually knows. But results expose them, because when real pressure comes, when actual decisions need to be made, performance doesn't cut it. You need thinking, and the mimic doesn't have it. They've memorized answers but can't solve problems. They can debate positions they've heard but can't think through new ones. They know what smart people say, but not how smart people think. This level is packed with people who read summaries and act like they read books, who quote things they don't understand, who use complexity as camouflage for shallow thinking. Machiavelli once said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." The mimic is all appearance, no substance, and eventually that catches up, because the world doesn't care how smart you sound, it cares what you can do. Moving past this level means something painful. You have to stop caring about looking intelligent and start caring about being effective. You have to trade applause for results, validation for power, and most mimics can't make that trade. The applause feels too good. The validation feels like progress, but it's not. It's just noise that keeps you stuck. Level 4, the calculator. The calculator stops performing and starts operating. They don't care if you think they're smart. They care if they win. They look at any situation and see what everyone else misses, the incentives, the leverage points, the traps. They ask different questions, not what should happen, but what will happen, not what's right, but what works. The calculator treats rules like weather. You don't argue with them, you don't ignore them, you understand them and use them to your advantage. They see morality as a tool, not a truth, not because they're evil, but because they understand that every moral framework serves someone's interest. And if you don't know whose interest, you're probably the one being served up. Where others think emotionally, the calculator thinks strategically. Someone insults them? They don't react, they calculate. Is this person useful, dangerous, or irrelevant? Then they respond accordingly. Not from emotion, from strategy. They're always 3 moves ahead. While you're processing what just happened, they're already planning what happens next and next and next. The calculator is the fox in Machiavelli's framework. Clever, cunning, hard to trap. They see the snares before stepping in them, spot the manipulation before falling for it, and recognize the game before playing it. But they're paranoid. Because once you see how everything works, once you see how easily people are controlled and used, you stop trusting anything at face value. Every kindness has an angle, every offer has a hook, every smile hides calculation. They're effective but exhausting because they never turn it off. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every interaction is a transaction. Everything is strategic. And here's the limitation. The calculator is still playing someone else's game. They learned the rules, they can exploit the rules, but they didn't write the rules. They're winning at a game they didn't design. You see calculators everywhere once you know what to look for. They're the ones who always land on their feet, who know which way things are going before they go, who avoid disasters everyone else walks into. They survive, they succeed, they get what they want more often than not. But they're still limited because cleverness alone doesn't change the game. It just helps you win the game that already exists. Moving past this level requires something the calculator struggles with: courage. Because seeing clearly is one thing, acting on what you see is something else entirely. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I see the game. Level 5, the operator. The operator takes everything the calculator has and adds one critical element: the will to act. The calculator sees what needs to be done. The operator does it. They make the hard calls, the unpopular decisions, the moves everyone else is too afraid to make. They don't wait for perfect information, don't wait for permission, don't wait for consensus. They move. When chaos hits, the operator sharpens. Everyone else is panicking, freezing, breaking down. The operator is executing, deciding, taking ground. Because pressure doesn't scare them, it clarifies. They lead from the front, visibly, undeniably. The lion, as Machiavelli called it, powerful, direct, impossible to ignore. Everyone knows who the operator is. Everyone knows what they're doing, and everyone knows they're the one making things happen. That's power. But it's also a target, because when you lead visibly, everyone knows where to aim. Your enemies know where you are, your competitors know what you're doing, and everyone who wants your position knows exactly how to come at you. The operator is constantly under fire. Every move gets scrutinized, every decision gets questioned, every mistake gets amplified. They can't hide, can't deflect, can't pass responsibility. It's exhausting, because once you're the one everyone looks to, once you're the one making the calls, you never get to rest. Every problem becomes yours. Every failure lands on you. This is the level most people picture when they think of power. The visible leader, the one in charge, the one everyone either follows or fights. But it's not the highest level, because visible power is limited power. The more people see you, the more they can target you. The more you stand out, the more you get hit. The operator burns bright. They reshape things through force of will, move mountains through pure determination. But they burn out fast, because that level of intensity isn't sustainable. History is full of operators, conquerors, revolutionaries, the ones who grabbed power and wielded it openly. They changed everything, but most of them didn't end well. Machiavelli once said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." The operator gets this. They choose effectiveness over popularity, results over approval, fear when necessary. But fear is fragile, because someone is always becoming more feared. Someone is always becoming more powerful. And eventually the lion gets taken down. The smart operators figure out that visible power has limits, that the most effective control doesn't announce itself, doesn't command, it influences. Level 6. The puppeteer. The puppeteer learned something the operator never did. Invisible power beats visible power every time. They stopped using force and started using influence. Stopped commanding and started suggesting. Stopped fighting and started shaping. The puppeteer doesn't tell you what to do, they make you want to do it. They don't threaten you into compliance. They create situations where compliance feels like choice. They control outcomes without anyone seeing the control. No fingerprints, no tracks, just results that somehow always go their way. The puppeteer shapes desire and fear, not through speeches or commands, but through subtle pressure, strategic information, and psychological manipulation. They know what you want, what you fear, and they use both to guide you exactly where they want you. They use people as extensions of their will. Every person in their orbit becomes a piece in play. Every relationship becomes leverage. Not cruelly, just strategically. The puppeteer is a master psychologist. They read people instantly, know what buttons to push, what words to use, what timing to apply. They see your programming and use it against you without you ever knowing. But here's the cost. They lose themselves in the process. When you're always playing a role, always calculating how to be perceived, always wearing a mask, you forget what your real face looks like. The performance becomes permanent. The mask becomes the face. The puppeteer is powerful but hollow, surrounded by people but completely alone, because nobody knows the real them. And eventually, they're not sure there is a real them anymore. This is the level of the spy, the advisor, the hidden hand, the one everyone suspects but nobody can prove. They operate in blind spots, in assumptions, in the space between what people think and what people do. You rarely see puppeteers, that's the point. They don't want credit, they want control. Let someone else take the spotlight while they pull the strings from the shadows. They are harder to fight than operators because you can, to target what you can't see, can't resist what you don't know is controlling you. But they pay for that power with their identity, and eventually that becomes unbearable. Because what's the point of winning if you've forgotten who you are? Level 7. The architect. The architect stops playing the game entirely. They design it. They realize something profound. Fighting within the system is temporary. Building the system is permanent. The architect doesn't manipulate people, doesn't control individuals, doesn't even care about specific outcomes. They design the environment that determines what outcomes are possible. They create systems, frameworks, structures, rules, and once those are in place, everyone else fights within them without realizing they're fighting inside someone else's design. The architect thinks in decades. While everyone else is focused on winning today, the architect is focused on owning tomorrow. They plant seeds that won't grow for years, build foundations that won't show until generations later. They're detached from immediate conflict. While everyone else is fighting battles, the architect designed the battlefield. While everyone else is playing chess, the architect decided what pieces exist and how they move. They own the structure, not the struggle. They don't care who wins specific fights. They care that every fight happens on their terms. Think about it. You can control a person, but they might break free. Control a group, but they might rebel. But design the system they operate within? Set the rules they think are natural? Now you control them without them knowing they're controlled. This is the level of the founder, the institution builder, the one who creates frameworks that outlive them. Their power isn't in action, it's in design. Most people don't see what the architect is doing. They look inactive, passive, disconnected, because their work is invisible until it's everywhere. By the time you realize you're operating inside someone else's system, it's too late to escape it. Machiavelli once said, "Whoever desires constant success must change his conduct with the times." The architect doesn't change with the times, they create the times. The architect sacrifices immediate recognition for permanent influence. Nobody applauds them today, but their impact compounds quietly, invisibly, inevitably. They're playing a different game than everyone else, and most people don't even know that game exists. Level 8. The Sovereign. The sovereign achieves something most people think is impossible: complete internal control. This isn't about controlling others anymore. It's about controlling yourself so completely that external circumstances can't touch you. The sovereign has emotional discipline. They feel everything: anger, fear, desire, but they're ruled by nothing. Emotions arise. They observe them. Then they choose their response consciously, deliberately. They're no longer reactive. Where everyone else responds automatically, the sovereign pauses, observes, chooses. Every action is intentional. Every word is measured. Nothing is accidental. Their power comes from self-mastery, not position. They don't need titles, don't need authority, don't need validation from anyone because their power is internal. It can't be given, it can't be taken away. The sovereign watches the game without needing to play it. They see the board, the pieces, the strategies, but they're not attached to any outcome. They move when movement serves them, stay still when stillness serves them, and the choice is always free. This is the level of the master, the sage, the one who transcended the need for external validation or control. They're not fighting, not manipulating, not proving anything to anyone. They realize that true power is internal, that the person who controls themselves controls their world, not by changing the world, but by becoming unchangeable within it. Most people never reach this level because it requires giving up everything. They think power is visibility, recognition, control over others. The sovereign has none of these, needs none of these. They're free in a way people at lower levels can't understand. Because freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's wanting nothing that can be taken from you. The sovereign can lose everything and remain whole, can win everything and remain unchanged, because their center is internal, unshakable. This level is rare, not because it's complicated, but because it requires sacrifice most people won't make. You have to die to who you were to become the sovereign, and most people would rather stay who they are. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I am sovereign. Level 9. The Void. The void is total psychological detachment. No ego, no fear, no attachment to outcomes, identity, or survival itself. They've released everything that makes someone controllable. You can't manipulate the void because there's nothing to manipulate. Can't threaten them because there's nothing they're afraid of losing. Can't bribe them because there's nothing they want. They're beyond the entire framework that drives human behavior. The void sees the game completely, not just their part, all of it. Every level below them, every strategy, every pattern. They see it like you see a map, total and obvious. They act only when necessary, not out of restraint. but because most action is unnecessary. Most movement is just noise. Most doing is just distraction from being. The void is terrifying to people at lower levels because you can't predict them, can't control them, can't understand them. They operate on principles that don't make sense to anyone still playing the game. This is the level of the monk who walked away from everything and found power in nothing. Not hiding, not retreating, not defeated, just done. Machiavelli once said, "Where the willingness is great, the difficulties cannot be great." The void released willingness itself. They moved beyond want, beyond need, beyond the entire structure of human desire. Most people think this level is weakness, giving up, quitting. They're completely wrong. The void is the most dangerous level there is because someone with nothing to lose, nothing to gain, and nothing to prove is unpredictable, unstoppable if they choose to move. But they rarely choose to move because they've seen through the illusion that movement matters. They've realized the entire game is agreed upon fiction, and they stopped agreeing. They're here but not here, present but not present, watching everything while being part of nothing. You can't fight the void, can't compete with them, can't even engage them because there's nothing to grab onto, nothing to push against. They're formless, boundless, empty. And in that emptiness is a kind of power that makes all other power look like games children play. Level 10, the myth. The myth no longer exists as a person. They're an idea, a symbol, an invisible force that shapes reality without being part of it. Their influence outlives their presence. Long after they're gone, their impact continues, because they transcended individual existence and became archetypal. People invoke their name without knowing them, follow their principles without meeting them, get shaped by their influence without realizing it. The myth shapes reality indirectly, not through their actions, but through the actions they inspired in others. Not through control, but through the frameworks they left behind that control everything. They're almost invisible. You can't point to them in the moment. You only see their effect afterward. Their gravity bending everything around them without being seen. They're almost inhuman, because they released everything relatable, understandable, predictable. They're pure influence, pure impact, pure legacy. This is the level of the founder whose name became the thing, the thinker whose ideas reshaped civilizations, the invisible hand that moved history without being part of it. You can't become the myth intentionally. It's not a strategy you execute. It is what happens when you operate at such a high level for so long that you become inseparable from the change you created. Machiavelli himself reached this level, dead for 500 years, still shaping how we think about power, still influencing decisions, still dangerous. That's the myth. Presence without presence, power without position, influence without identity. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I am inevitable. So where are you? Be honest. Not where you want to be, not where you think you should be, where you actually are right now when pressure comes and nobody else watching. Most people never move past level 3. They spend their whole lives copying, believing, performing, pretending to think, while just repeating patterns someone else programmed. And that's by design. The system needs sleepers, believers, and mimics. They're predictable, controllable, useful. So, the system creates tests that measure obedience and calls it intelligence. Creates hierarchies that reward performance and calls it merit. But real intelligence, real thinking, that's dangerous. That disrupts, that threatens the existing order. Here is the Machiavellian truth nobody wants to hear. The world doesn't reward who's right. It rewards who understands, who sees clearly, who acts decisively, while everyone else is reacting emotionally. You don't move up by learning more. Information doesn't do it. Knowledge doesn't do it. You move up by removing illusions, stripping away comfortable lies, seeing what's actually happening instead of what you're told is happening. Every level up requires sacrifice. The sleeper sacrifices comfort. The believer sacrifices righteousness. The mimic sacrifices validation. The calculator sacrifices connection. The operator sacrifices peace. The puppeteer sacrifices identity. The architect sacrifices recognition. The sovereign sacrifices attachment. The void sacrifices everything. Most people won't make those sacrifices. They'll watch this video, maybe feel something, then go right back to whatever level they were at before. Because comfort is stronger than growth. Familiarity is stronger than freedom. But for those of you who actually heard this, who recognized yourself somewhere in these levels and felt that uncomfortable truth, the moment you start thinking instead of reacting, you stop being a pawn. The moment you see the game clearly, you stop being played. The moment you choose your responses instead of following your programming, you become dangerous. And dangerous people change things, not because they're smarter, not because they're better, but because they're awake, operating at a level most people don't know exists. So, which level are you at, and which level are you moving toward? Because standing still is just moving backward in slow motion, and moving backward means becoming someone else's tool. The choice is yours, it's always been yours. Most people just never realize they have one. If this video showed you something you needed to see, hit that like button, share it with someone who's ready to hear this, and subscribe, because we're going deeper into these ideas, into the reality behind the reality, into the thinking that separates pawns from players. Your next move starts now.